"Ma'am," the manager growled, loud enough to make Forks pause midair. "This isn't a shelter." The dish towel slipped from Nora Shelton's hand. She stood between two doorways, one behind her, leading to the dry storage room where she had quietly laid out an old sleeping mat hours earlier. The other, in front of her, held the man sitting hunched over a mug, cupping it like it was the last source of warmth left in the world. Outside, rain clawed at the glass, sideways, relentless, uninvited. Inside, no one stood. No one spoke. Just chairs shifting, phones flipped face down, eyes looking anywhere but at her. Walter Raines tried to rise, but his leg buckled. The same leg wrapped in reused gauze. The same leg that had carried lives on its back long before anyone in this room ever noticed his face. "You embarrassed this place," the manager snapped again, pointing one hand at Nora, the other toward the exit. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just stood there, trembling, but upright, not out of defiance, but because something in her refused to move. The letter was still in her apron pocket, and she wasn't going to let him be invisible again. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? This story means more when I know who's listening. I read every comment. Really. Nora Shelton didn't take up space. Not in the way people usually notice. She moved like someone taught not to ask twice, shoulders tucked, steps soft, presence polite. In the Depot Cafe where she worked, her name tag had long since faded and no one asked her to replace it. She opened before sunrise, wiped the counters before the heat kicked in, and brewed the coffee that kept bus drivers from drifting off before their final runs. No one told her to do those things. She just did. Steady. Without noise. People called her the quiet one behind the counter. Not because she was shy, but because she never asked for anything. If someone knocked over a salt shaker and didn't pick it up, Nora did. If a coworker left the sink full, she emptied it. If a teenager came in shivering and asked for tap water, she warmed a cup and handed it over with a napkin. Behind the counter, she kept a small folded cloth tucked into a drawer. It was faded green with the edges hand-stitched in navy thread. Her grandmother had sewn it years ago, the same woman who raised her after Nora's mother disappeared into a fog of pills and closed doors. Her grandmother, Margaret, had been a field nurse in Korea. She used to say, "Honor isn't loud, Nora. It's how you clean the table when nobody's looking." Margaret taught her to fix a coffee machine before she was 10, press a shirt with pride, and treat people the same whether they wore suits or socks full of holes. She died on a Thursday, quietly, like everything else she did, and left Nora with an apartment full of cloth memories and one drawer full of medals no one ever asked about. There were no pictures of Nora on social media. No birthday dinners, no weekend getaways. She spent her days behind a laminated menu and her nights beneath a single window with blinds that never opened all the way. But she never complained. She had a routine. 5 a.m. Unlock the cafe, 7:15. Refill the sugar bins, 1 ra. Lunch break, if there was time, 3:30. Clock out, pick up cat food, check for coupons, 9 p.m. Heat up leftovers, call no one. And somewhere in that rhythm, she made room for others. Not in big headline-worthy ways, in invisible ones. She noticed when the night shift cleaner had a limp he didn't mention. She noticed when the new cook kept burning toast the day after his wife left. She noticed the worn sneakers of a kid trying to look grown up in a borrowed jacket. She said nothing. She just saw. The world didn't see Nora Shelton. But she carried herself like someone who did not need applause to stand tall. There was a kind of stillness to her, the kind that makes noise feel unnecessary. That's why when Walter Raines walked in that night, soaked, quiet, holding a crumpled letter like it was sacred, she didn't look away like the others did. She stood steady, like she'd been waiting her whole life to be asked to notice someone who had been forgotten. The rain hadn't let up. It fell in sheets now, the kind that erased footprints before they could mean anything. Outside the cafe windows, headlights passed in smears, and steam fogged the lower panes. Inside, a country song hummed low from the jukebox no one had paid for. At 8:17 p.m., the door creaked open with a gust of wind and something heavier, the kind of presence that makes conversations stall. People looked up for half a second, then quickly went back to stirring their coffee. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged on either side. Walter Raines. His coat hung in tatters, military green turned gray with time and rain. A limp tugged at his left side, the leg dragging half a beat behind the rest of him. Bandages peeked out from beneath the hem of his jeans, and one of his boots was held together with duct tape. In his right hand, he held a paper bag, damp and folded at the corners. In his left, a crumpled knit cap. He didn't look for a table. He looked for permission, and found none, except from Nora. She was refilling the creamers when their eyes met, just for a moment, but it was enough. She set the pitcher down and walked over, towel still in hand, no hesitation in her step. "Would you like to sit down somewhere warm?" she asked gently. He blinked, not because of the question, but as if unsure it was meant for him. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said, voice hoarse, quiet. "Just a cup of hot water, ma'am. And maybe a crust of bread if it's going stale." The phrasing hit something in Nora's memory, something stitched into the stories her grandmother used to tell about Yongi winters and soldiers who wouldn't ask for more than they thought they deserved. Nora nodded once. "I'll see what we've got." She didn't ask for approval. She didn't ask the manager. She walked to the back and pulled a small plate from under the heat lamp, an untouched bowl of stew someone had sent back earlier with no explanation. It was still warm. She added 2 slices of bread, a fresh mug of black coffee, and placed them on a tray with a cloth napkin. When she returned, Walter was still standing, hand resting on the back of the booth like it was the only solid thing in the room. She slid the tray in front of him. "This was headed for the trash. It's yours if you want it." He looked at the food, then at her, then back at the food. "I can't pay," he said softly. "You don't need to," she replied. "It's already been covered." His hands trembled as he reached for the mug. His fingers curled around the handle like it weighed more than it should. "You remind me of someone," he whispered. "My wife. She believed in quiet mercy. Said kindness doesn't need an audience." Nora blinked slowly, the burn behind her eyes familiar but unwelcome. She nodded once, stepped back, and left him to eat. She didn't know yet that the security camera had recorded the entire exchange. She didn't know who had already begun whispering about her behind the kitchen door. All she knew was that someone who had carried too much for too long was finally warm. And that felt like enough. He had just finished the bread. Walter sat a little straighter now, though the effort showed in his shoulders. His hands no longer trembled, but rested on the table, one on the spoon, the other beside the letter folded neatly by his tray. The cafe had thinned out. Only 5 customers remained. A trucker checking his GPS, 2 teenagers sharing fries, and a mother with her daughter coloring silently at the corner booth. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of a pen at the register. Nora was drying cups when the manager stormed in from the back, red-faced, phone in hand. He waved it in the air. "You think this is a joke, Nora? You giving out free meals like we're a church pantry?" The mother stopped coloring. The trucker paused his scrolling. No one looked up. Nora turned calmly. "It was going to be thrown out. He asked for hot water. I gave him stew that no one wanted." The manager stepped closer. "You embarrassed this place." His voice climbed, not loud by accident, but by intention. "This is not a shelter. You don't decide who gets served. That's my job." Walter started to rise, the effort pained and slow. Nora raised a hand without turning. "It's okay," she said gently. "Please sit." "You gonna pay for his food out of your own tips now?" The manager scoffed. She nodded. "I already did." Someone near the back recorded the scene. The phone's red light blinked unnoticed. The manager slammed his hand on the counter, a sharp crack like a gavel. "You're done here, Nora, right now. Take your apron and go." She untied it slowly, folded it once, Then once more. She didn't plead. She didn't raise her voice. She turned to Walter and nodded. "Finish your meal," she said softly. "I'll be outside." As she stepped into the rain, shoes already soaked, she didn't glance back. No one followed. No one said she was right. No one thanked her. Inside, someone whispered, "That's what happens when you bring trouble inside." A fry dropped into ketchup. A coffee cup turned in place. The silence hurt more than the shouting. Outside, Nora found cover beneath the narrow awning. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Not yet. A rustling sound came from the alley beside the cafe. Walter was there, hunched and breathless, his coat clinging to his frame. "I saw what happened," he said. "You shouldn't have paid that price for me." "You didn't do anything wrong," Nora said. "You were cold. That's not a crime." He reached into his coat and took out something wrapped in a torn corner of military fabric. Inside, a tarnished medal and a folded letter with water-stained edges. "Name's Walter Raines," he rasped. "If I don't make it through this winter, I want someone to know I existed." He pressed it into her hand, then disappeared into the storm without waiting for a goodbye. Nora stood there holding what remained of a man the world had chosen not to see. And somehow she felt heavier than she ever had. The video hit the internet by noon. It wasn't meant to go viral. A shaky phone clip filmed sideways from the back of the cafe. Nora standing calm, apron in hand, as the manager pointed at the door with a voice soaked in disgust. The caption read, "Waitress fired for feeding a homeless man." And just like that, the floodgates opened. Most of the comments weren't kind. Rules are rules. Probably not the first time she gave away food. Maybe she was stealing too. Nora didn't respond. She didn't have a platform or Wi-Fi. She borrowed a neighbor's hotspot just long enough to check her bank account, $42. 83s. 3 job applications were rejected before she finished them. One diner slid her resume back across the counter without a word. Another said kindly but firmly, "We just can't afford the attention, sweetheart." She didn't argue. She understood how people worked. Silent strength doesn't always open doors. That night, she walked past the same bus station bench where she'd first seen Walter Raines. He wasn't there. The spot was empty. A soaked scrap of newspaper stuck to the ground, curling at the edges. She held the letter and the medal in her coat pocket like something sacred. Didn't show them. Didn't post about them. Just carried them. At 5:45 the next morning, a caravan of black SUVs turned off the highway and crept down the wet streets of the town. It was quiet, deliberate, each vehicle parked with precision outside the cafe that had fired her. The first door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and boots that clicked like they still remembered command. Colonel David Hale. He adjusted the medals on his coat, took a breath, and opened the cafe door. The bell chimed. Wayne, the manager, was wiping down the counter. He looked up and nearly dropped the glass in his hand. "Can I help you?" he asked. Colonel Hale didn't flinch. "I'm here about a man you turned away," he said, "and the woman you fired for honoring him." Wayne's eyes narrowed. "This is a private business, sir. I don't know what you—" "You do," Hale interrupted. "His name was Walter Raines. You didn't know him, but I did." The cafe went still. In 2006, he carried 3 of us out of a fire zone in Kandahar. He refused evacuation. Took shrapnel to the leg and kept moving. He saved lives and then disappeared. We searched for years. VA lost track of him. The system forgot. But you— He looked around. "You found him." He turned to the door. "Bring her in." Nora had been standing across the street watching from the sidewalk. She hadn't planned to come closer. She wasn't dressed for it. But when the line of soldiers began to emerge, 2 by 2, then 4 by 4, she couldn't move. Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, some young, some old, all in full-dress uniform, all in silent formation stretching down the block. 300 in total, not a word, not a sound, only boots on pavement and breath held between generations. As Nora stepped forward, the formation shifted. and every hand rose to salute. She stopped, couldn't breathe. Colonel Hale met her halfway and opened a black case. Inside was Walter's medal, now polished. Beside it, a laminated copy of the letter he had carried in his coat. He placed it in her hands. "He gave it to you," he said. "So it belongs with you." Nora shook her head, tears finally finding space. "I don't deserve this." "You do," Hale said, "because you didn't look away." She said nothing. She just held the medal, not like a prize, but like a memory someone had trusted her to protect. The cafe closed within a week. Vendors canceled deliveries. Staff resigned. Veterans picketed the sidewalk until the lights inside went dark and the windows gathered dust. The "Open 24 hours" sign buzzed once, flickered, and died. But Nora didn't gloat. She didn't post. She didn't speak to the cameras. She packed up the medal and the letter in a small wooden box, the kind that once held recipe cards, and placed it on her nightstand beside a lamp with a fraying cord. 3 days later, a knock came at her door. A woman stood outside, tall, soft-spoken, and dressed in a navy blue sweater. She introduced herself as Mary Ann Fletcher, co-founder of a veteran-run mobile food initiative called Field Line. They'd seen the video. They'd heard about Walter Raines. They needed someone steady. Not loud, not perfect, just someone like you. Nora accepted. By the end of the month, she was helping run a rolling kitchen staffed by veterans, nurses, teenagers with nowhere to be, and people who knew what it meant to go unnoticed. They served hot meals along truck stops, under bridges, beside forgotten city parks, places where quiet hunger waited with no signs and no lines. Inside Nora's mobile unit, just above the service window, a piece of cloth had been pinned to the wall. It was green, hand-stitched at the edges, her grandmother's cloth. Below it hung a single word, embroidered in calm gray thread: steady, no slogans, no mission statement. Just that. One evening, just before packing up, a young girl approached the window. She held a granola bar in one hand and a drawing in the other, a picture of a woman in an apron standing beside a man with a medal. "My brother said you helped someone," she said. Nora smiled. The girl held out the paper like it was something valuable. "You can have it. My grandpa was in the war, too." Nora didn't answer right away. She placed her hand over her heart, the same way those 300 soldiers had days earlier. And she nodded. Not because she wanted recognition, but because someone still remembered. At night, in the quiet, Nora still ran her fingers across the edges of that box. The metal inside was cool to the touch. She didn't need to open it often. It wasn't the metal she needed. It was the weight of having been seen, because in a world obsessed with applause, she had offered something rare: dignity, when no one was clapping. If this story moved you, type "steady" in the comments. Your words matter, and I read every one of them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, here's your quiet reminder. Thank you for standing with us today.